Well, welcome back to Wednesday workshop at Be So Creative Studios. And this is part two of a two-part series on constructing a t-shirt. And I am wearing another t-shirt today that I made. The one I'm making for this project is the gray one here with the little dots. This one's a 3/4 sleeve. That just shows you have the option on your t-shirt pattern to do your sleeves any way you like. So here is the t-shirt, and last time, as you recall, we were able to sew the shoulder seams. We spent some time putting that neckband on, but we haven't top stitched it or finished it yet. We just sewed it to the neck edge. We put on the sleeves, and then we sewed up the side seams. And I want to show you at this point how I do go in here with the ironing board. This is a great time to use the round part of your ironing board because you can get these round areas around here and press those seam allowances. Here's how I might do the sleeves. You can get a sleeve there, and that way you've got a nice smooth surface here that you can press your seam allowances all along your sleeve. And so now I want to go over to the neckline, and the first thing we're going to do today on the sewing machine is I'm going to show you how I like to top stitch the neckline. We've sewn our band on, and now that band is just going to get folded to the back, just like that. And now at this point, you might choose to take pins, and you can just set a pin in there to hold it in like that. My favorite are these Wonder Clips. Here's what they look like. There's a big box of 50 red ones. Here's a slightly smaller size of yellow ones. I love Wonder Clips because, first of all, they don't stick you and they don't hurt. And secondly, they have one flat edge here, and then they have a round edge. So whatever edge is going to be against the sewing machine, whichever is going to be on the bottom, you want to make sure the flat edge is going to be there. I know that I'm going to turn this over and sew with this side down. So I'm going to put the flat edge here and just watch how nicely it goes on there and just holds that on with no pins needed. So no sticking yourself. They're easy to readjust. And so I just keep coming around here. And really, I don't even need to press this yet. I'm just folding it right over the seam allowance that the serger made. And you can just keep bringing it around here. Snapping your clips. The only thing you want to make sure of is that your seam allowance comes all the way down past the seam that you sewed so that it will be caught in the top stitching that we're about to do. And you just keep going around until you feel like I'm putting them about every 2 inches apart. I might put more, but I ran out of red Wonder Clips. So around like that. And so here's what it's going to look like on the front. Now I can look down here and just check and see, does that look nice and even? Is that the way I want my finished band to look? Now we get to do the fun part of coming in and top stitching this band down. We're going to put a top stitch here so that it catches the raw edge back here. And for that, I like to use the sewing machine and a double needle. So let me show you a little bit about double needles. A lot of people, when they hear double needle, if they're a new sewist, they just get a panic. Like, I haven't even figured out one needle yet. How can I do a double needle? That sounds too difficult. A double needle is the simplest thing in the world to use because there's nothing to do except put it in, and instead of threading one needle, you just thread two needles. And the double needle does the work for you, and you end up getting parallel lines when you sew. And so double needles come in different widths apart. And the one that I like to use, that I am using right now, is I'm going to use a double needle that's designed for stretch fabric because it'll have that slightly ballpoint type edge. You could get one that says ballpoint. And then I like to use one that's either 2.0 or 2.5 millimeters apart. That's how wide apart the parallel lines are going to be when the needles sew. Now for thread, you do need two spools of thread, and both spools are going to show. So rather than go out and buy myself two matching threads, I just use one thread and then I wind a bobbin with the same thread, and I'm going to use this bobbin as top thread, and this is top thread. And you do need somewhere on your machine to have two spool holders. So if you don't have two spool holders on your machine, you might get a thread stand and use that as one of the spool holders, but most machines will have two spool holders. And so let's go over to the machine now, and I'll show you how I get this set up for double needle sewing. Here's my regular spool, and I know for this baby lock, this is the Brilliant, I know somewhere in the supplies I have a second spool that actually snaps right here. I don't have it with me today. So here's another option. You can just get a separate spool stand, thread stand, and I think I will put my bobbin on that. Looks so small on that big thread stand. And it just comes up like that. Then the other spool is just going to go on here like normal. Down here on the machine, I have inserted the double needle, and it goes in just exactly like a regular needle. It goes up as one needle, but it splits off into two. So you only feel like you're putting one needle in. In the same way, it's got a flat shank on the back, and you put that towards the back. I do like to use a presser foot that has the ability for me to see in there. So I would recommend, this is the end foot for the baby lock. It's designed for decorative stitching. I would recommend that one or any open toe foot that you have where it's clear here or open here, because you're going to want to be able to see exactly where that needle is landing every time it takes a stitch. And your regular presser foot doesn't give you the ability to do that. And so now in order to thread this, there's really nothing to it. We're just going to follow the steps to thread like normal. You can't use automatic threading for this. You cannot use a machine threader or your push button threading because it's only designed for that needle to be right in the center, and it will miss. It will miss both eyes of the needle. It'll go right in between. So these have to be threaded the old-fashioned way. So now I'm going to do my second thread, and it goes through the very same pathway as the first. But this time I'm just going to put it through the needle on the right, and it doesn't matter left or right as long as they both get some thread. Some machines, and you will need to read the instructions for your own machine, but some machines want you to put one thread to the left of the tension disc here and one thread to the right of the tension disc. But some machines just tell you to go ahead and thread it just normally. So you'll somewhere in your machine manual, it will tell you how to sew with a double needle. It took me a few seconds, but I've gotten them both threaded. And on the bottom, I've just put a neutral color, a white, whatever I want to have on the back of my garment. Over in my stitches, I'm just going to set this to regular straight stitch sewing. I don't need to worry about doing a stretch stitch with a double needle because there is already a stretch built into double needle. It will zigzag on the back, and so it will already have a nice stretch to it. So I want to start on the back just because, you know, you want to practice on the back before you have the stitches go to the front. This part of my presser foot, the center, is going to be about in the center of the seam. And you might want it to go a little to the left of the seam. It's up to you, but I'm going to try to center it right in the seam. And the theory is that the left needle is going to be just to the left of the seam, and the right needle is going to end up top stitching right on top of the neckband. And so I'll go very slowly. And here I go. Get your glasses on because this takes some good eyes. Okay, I'm going to stop there for now. And I'll just show you what we've got here. So you've got that bottom stitch right below the neckband, and then you've got one little stitch that's right on the neckband. And then on the back, you can see that it's caught that raw edge with a zigzag. And then all I would need to do is come along with my scissors, and I'll just pull up that loose edge, and I can just trim right along next to that, and I'll end up having a nice finished edge on that all the way around. I might recommend also you can do a little bit longer stitch here than you normally do. You might set your machine for maybe a 3mm stitch. You'll get a little bit more of a decorative look the way it would look in ready to wear. So once you get your neckline stitched all the way around, it is time to do the final touch, which is hemming the sleeves and the bottom of the shirt. And for that, I'm going to go back to the serger and we're going to use the cover stitch. So let's get the serger set up. We had a great comment from one of our listeners, our watchers, Deborah. Thanks, Deborah. I really appreciate your input. She was asking, could you just do a cover stitch? Could you use the cover stitch on your serger to do what I did with the double needle to top stitch the neckline band on? And I had never thought of that. And the reason why is because generally when I serge, you have this regular serger foot, and it's just, there's so much metal there that it's hard for me to see if my needles are going right in the right place. So I tried it and I could do it, but it was hard to see the needles inside that little slot. But then I remembered, hey, I have a lot of extra feet and accessories with my serger. It's kind of a new serger for me. And lo and behold, I have this clear foot I'm using an ovation, a baby lock ovation. I had a clear foot. I thought, I wonder what that would be like. And so I just experimented a little bit. I'm just kind of rolling up a couple of layers to simulate that idea of having the neckband. And by golly, I really liked the results I was getting. So I'm able to see exactly where my needles are going in, and I can see where my line is that I want to follow. And so I'm able to keep that fabric right in the center and just use my cover stitch. And I'm really liking this. So I know Marcia had answered with a comment that yes, she could do this, and so I am practicing, and I'm really glad. I think I may have found a new way to put the neckline on. There's the results I'm getting with that, and it's really very similar, but it seems to be feeding a little bit easier than my double needle fed.
And of course it leaves that beautiful stretchy finish on the back. So I am going to try that new idea next time I make my t-shirt. So I feel like the sleeves are probably the harder thing to do cover stitch on because they're so little and round. So we'll start with those. Those are the most difficult things. Now I have my machine set up for cover stitch, and on my machine I've set it up for the center and the right needle, so it's narrow. You can either do left needle center or center needle right, and that's narrow. And you will have to look up and figure out how to set up your serger for cover stitch. But I've also put two upper threads. My two threads are my gray color that I want to use for this, and my cover stitch underneath is just going to be white. I don't really care. My fabric's kind of white underneath. You just want to be sure that you have of course, your sleeve, you've pressed it in, and you are working from the front side for the cover stitch because you want it to look really pretty and decorative. You just have to do a few inches at a time. And I like to put a mark, kind of make a mark over here about how far in I want my cover stitch to be. And so for me, I think I'm going to do it so that it's right along this little line here on my machine. But you can do yours. I think I want it just past that line. So if you want to put a little piece of tape there, sometimes I put a little piece of tape right here to give myself an edge where I want my fold of my fabric to be, my hem, and that way my cover stitch will be equidistant all the way around. I want to make sure that I don't have anything underneath that foot, and I just opened myself up about 3 inches of hem, and I begin. Needles down. Now I can wrangle my fabric here, open up myself another little 3-inch or 2-inch flat space. So when you get towards the place that you started, I take these 2 threads and put them straight out, and that gives me a place to stop. So now I can sew until I know that my needle has reached those spots. I'll sew a couple of stitches past, and now to get out of a cover stitch, what you do is go backwards 1 turn. So do your wheel backwards 1 complete turn, and when you do that and raise your presser foot, your threads will pull right out. Cut them off, and there's my nice cover stitch. And then on the back, again, you're just going to come along, and sometimes I like to use my curved embroidery scissors, and you're just going to snip that raw edge away close to your stitching so that it has a nice finished edge. After I finish that cover stitch, it can get pulled out very, very easily. So I like to take these threads, I'm going to bury them, I'm going to thread them with a needle, and I use the needles that are easy thread. And I'm just going to poke all of these threads to the back and actually tie knots in them and probably bury them down here under the hem, just to make sure I don't have any loose threads that will eventually pull out. All right, I'm so excited because I'm just ready to try this on. I am just about done. But before I do, one last thing. There has been so much stretching and tugging on all of these seams, all of these hems, and especially this neckline, because I've had to stretch it so much that it's going to stretch a bit out of shape. And so I like to lay mine on an ironing pad and take my steam iron, and without pushing on it, just blow some steam. I really like to blow a lot of steam over that. And you may even see the knit start to shrink back in a little bit. Again, not touching the iron to the surface, but let that steam shrink the knit back into shape after it has been stretched out a bit. You might want to do the same thing with the sleeves and the hem at the bottom. Just before you really touch the iron to it and press it smooth, Give it a good steam, let it shrink back to its natural state.
Here it is, finished t-shirt. And after I did do all that steaming of these parts that I sewn, I let it cool and then I did give it a nice pressing. And now the fun part, I get to go try it on and see how it works. So I'll be right back. So it's ready, it's done, it fits, and I love it. And I hope you love yours too. And thank you so much for your comments. We really appreciate them. Your questions, we'll be looking for those and we'll be happy to answer them for you. And we just appreciate you so much watching these 2 weeks. And stay tuned next week, we'll have something new for you. Goodbye from Be So Creative.